And we are live. Hey, adventurers, welcome back to another author interview. This was with Charles McGarry, author of Talendor's Guest, and just recently, The Nomad's Crucible. So, introduce yourself. What can you tell us about yourself to get started?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you having me on. I've been writing for a long time, probably at least 10 plus years, 12 years, something like that. And I'm 49, turned 49 this year, and um I have two adult children and a cat that's around here somewhere. She may pop in at some point. We also have another cat in the household, so he may pop his head in at some point. But yeah, I also have a booktube channel, so I do book reviews and other content related to books, fantasy, sci-fi, all that good stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm just kind of an all-around nerd.
that's good. That's all right. All right. So you have two books released at the
Mhm.
moment. Talendor's Guest and Nomad's Crucible. What do you want to talk about Talendor's Guest, which is your first one? Anything you want to say about that one?
Yeah, that one was kind of that was kind of an experiment in a sense. It was initially just a book of short stories, had a completely different name, and I got picked up by a small publishing house that made some suggestions as to how I could tweak it and make it so it's not a book of short stories necessarily.
Mhm.
They advised me that that wouldn't necessarily sell for a new author.
Right.
So I created a frame story for it that kind of made it more of a I mean, it's been compared to like Arabian Nights, uh,
Right.
Canterbury Tales type of book,
Hmm.
and the frame story kind of did that for it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that's it, and all of the stories in there I'm really proud of, and I do have some favorites for sure.
Hmm.
The Ink Master is definitely one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
Yeah.
Um, Sunwielder is as well. So I've definitely got favorites, but it's kind of a it's kind of an introduction to a larger universe that I want to create.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And then, so is Nomad's Crucible set in that shared universe then?
it is. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Nomad's Crucible is set on a planet called Cydia, and it's one of many. It's trying to remember the name of my galaxy that it's set in right
Mhm.
now, but in any case, yeah, it's in one of the many galaxies uh, in Novera, which is what I'm calling my my larger universe.
Okay.
And yeah, it's kind of a unique planet. It does not rotate on its axis,
Hmm.
or doesn't have an axis rather to really rotate
Yeah.
on, and so uh, the chunk of the planet that's actually inhabitable is pretty much beset by sunlight and heat
Hmm.
year round, and the rest of the planet is kind of a frozen wasteland.
Yeah.
So uh,
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
Fun. I don't know. I'm sure you are aware, but I love world building and I love seeing what authors do to it and how they can just take something and that, I mean, obviously that includes the magic system, but it just take a world and change the, not even break the laws that we have usually, but just tweak them to make sense with that world and just change our perception of reality to some degree. And
Mhm.
I don't know, I thought you did a really good job in Crucible as well as in Talendor's Guest, which is just all these different stories. And I know for myself, Talendor's Guest, the framing narrative just made me all the more invested in each of those stories. So
Oh,
I
thank
really
you.
enjoyed the framing narrative. So
I'm really glad you did. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's I'm really happy with how Talendor's Guest became what it did, because I think it's a much better story than what I initially created. Because when I rewrote it and added the frame story, I did tweak some of the stories
mhm.
themselves and make it more cohesive and flow a little better. And
Yeah.
so I'm happy with how it turned out, and I'm really glad that you appreciated the frame story and the main characters of that frame story. So
Mhm.
yeah, um, and I was really impressed with my artist too, because she did a really good job of showcasing Talendor, I guess.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
she
I don't know. I'm really I love this first cover art. The just the massive dragon head over the all the books and everything. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then on Crucible too, it's a very stylistic, very intentional in what you chose to do with it, and I do appreciate that as well. Do you want to shout out your cover artists?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Lindsay Berker is the artist on Talendor's Guest, and I was kind of assigned to her when I got picked up by that small publisher. And then yeah, so yeah, she's really amazing, and she's got a lot of other artwork out there that's really awesome as well. I bought some prints of some of her other stuff because I really liked it. Um,
That's cool.
and then um, and then my cover artist for the Nomad's Crucible is Kat Fiscoletti, and she is very amazing. And she was very easy to work with, because I told her that for the Nomad's Crucible, I wanted to go with more of a conceptual cover as
Hmm.
opposed to like a scenic cover.
Right.
And I gave her some of the things I was looking for, and she ran with it and just created something truly spectacular, I think.
Yeah, it does really fit the vibe and the atmosphere of the book. I know I mentioned to you a while back that wasn't quite what I had imagined, but
Right.
that doesn't make it wrong. That's just people's perceptions, different readers' perceptions. And then now seeing that cover, I'm able to recontextualize the story to some degree, and not like you said, it's not a scenic cover. It's more concept,
Yeah.
and that does help. That helps you to recontextualize to actually envision the story. And that's, in my opinion, that's what a good cover should do. Is it should inform your decision making a little bit, your perception a little bit on the stories. And so I think that it does a really good job with that.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like for all of my books, I probably want to go more conceptual.
Hmm.
Even though Talendor's Guest is a great cover, it also stands out from the other books I will write, because it's more of a,
Right.
it's kind of like a
Yeah.
buffet. You get a little bit of all my different stories, whereas with the conceptual covers, I I like to leave my stories up to the imagination of the reader,
Hmm.
and I feel like if I do something that's depicting a scene from the book or something like that, it will kinda keep the reader's imagination out of it a little bit more, and that's something I
Yeah,
don't want. So,
I can see that. Yeah, makes
yeah.
sense. It's a Either way. I mean, they're both good covers. They very eye catchy. I love dragons, and so a massive dragon on the cover of a book is never gonna go wrong with me. But no, I do appreciate both the covers.
Cool. I'm glad.
So, what when you were writing Talendor, and then also specifically this second one, this Nomad's Crucible, what made you decide that Crucible would be your next book?
It's the story that I kept coming back to uh in my perusal of all of my different story ideas. It's the one that I kept coming back to. It's the one that I kept having just being flooded with ideas for, and uh, captured my personal interest of what I wanted to write about.
Mhm.
And so that's really what did it. When I'm able to come up with uh, significant portions of the book in my head before I start writing it, that's when I know I'm like, oh, okay, that's the story I need to focus on and work on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a great way to do it. I mean, I'm not a writer. I've never published a book, anything like that. But I know for any of the stories that I do have in my mind, the ones that get the most work done on them are the ones that I have entire scenes written out or envision entire things, the beginning and the very end or something like that. And then I just have to figure out how to get there, whatever it might be.
Hmm.
So I understand. I understand you saying that those are the ones that you had the most of it written that was just kind of writing itself, that you were getting the ideas for it. It makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was even that way with Talendor's Guest. There's certain stories in there that were the first ones to be written. The
Hmm.
Ink Master is one of those, and there's a couple of others that I had dreams about. And so, as you know, as soon as I woke up from those dreams, I had to write everything down,
Right.
and then eventually, I sometimes I just like to write down my dreams, but eventually I'm like, this could make a good story, and so those turned into to stories in the
Hmm.
book. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so some of those were the first to be written over others, but
Hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Where's the question that I was going to ask you? So, what have you learned from writing these two books, especially that has worked really well for you that you're going to keep doing in the next ones?
Yeah. I've learned that I think the biggest thing I've learned is that I need some structure. Um, I've always fancied myself a pantser or a
Mm.
gardener, like George R. R. Martin likes to call it, a gardener. But I don't. I'm not so structured that I need a complete outline of the book before I start
Mhm.
writing. I like to sit down and write and see where the characters go and where the story's going. But I feel like I do need a little bit of structure, like, how long do I want the book to be? Um, how detailed of a backstory do I want certain characters to have, and who
Mhm.
are those certain characters, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So I do sit down and kind of what I'll do is I'll do character sheets, kind of like in D&D.
Mhm.
I'll sit
Yeah.
down and kind of pick a character, and decide, okay, where did he come from? What are some of his quirks, and what does he like? What does he not like? What kind of foods does he like? Things like that.
Mhm.
So I need a little bit of structure, and with Talendor's Guest, I went really off the cuff, and I learned quickly that didn't work the best for
Mm.
me. So I gave myself a little
Yeah.
bit more structure with Nomad, and I
Makes
think,
sense. Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
So, what advice would you have for somebody else, for a new writer that hasn't experienced or experimented with how they write best yet? What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the best thing is to try different styles. You know,
Mhm.
even try different times of writing. Some authors will get up and first thing in the morning, their goal
Mhm.
is to write 2,500 words,
Yeah.
and maybe that works for them, but it doesn't work for somebody else. And maybe try sitting down to write out an outline of the book that you want to do, and see if that works for you. So try different styles, and eventually you'll fall into one that works best for you. Um,
Yeah.
don't feel like you have to go by Brandon Sanderson.
Mhm.
Don't feel like you
Yeah.
have to be a Brandon Sanderson type writer, because that might
Right.
not work for you.
Yeah, and it might not work for your readers either. I mean,
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
plenty of readers or even booktubers who say, "Yeah, Sanderson, I like his stories sometimes, but they're not they're not exactly for me." And that's, I mean, even me, I'm that way now. I like his stories. I think he's a good writer, but he's as I continue to read, and I think as he continues to write, he strays away from where I'm reading,
Mhm.
and um, that's not a bad thing. It's good to know your taste as a reader, but definitely as a writer, I think it's important to know where you're coming from as a writer and how you work best. So, good advice.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and also I think too, I would say don't put a lot of pressure on yourself, especially when most people nowadays have a full-time day job.
Hmm.
It's very rare for it's very rare to have the working author anymore where, Brandon Sanderson does it full time,
Yeah,
George R. Martin does it full time, and so don't put pressure on yourself to crank out the kind of volume that they do.
right. Yeah, and that makes
Yeah.
sense. That's, I mean, that's important to understand as well. You're not just most authors aren't just going to decide one day, okay, I'm going to sit down and be an author full time.
Mhm.
It doesn't. Unfortunately, our world doesn't work that way, and you still need money to survive.
Yes, absolutely.
So what have you then learned from this one that you will not do in the future? Things that didn't work for you.
Yeah, with this one, I I tried to start I tried to at least have the ending of the story in mind with where I
Hmm.
wanted to go, and I learned early on in the book that that's not going to work out the way I wanted it to at all,
Right.
and so, I guess I learned to, for lack of a better phrase, listen to the voices in my head and let them just
Uh-huh.
kinda direct the story as it goes,
Right.
because I definitely had an idea of where the story was going to end, and it just didn't work out that way.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it
That's
was
good to
it
know
it
too.
was
Yeah.
better that it didn't actually.
Right. That, yeah. Yeah. And do you, so were you when you were thinking you knew the ending, were you trying to write in foreshadowing for that ending and then it just wasn't working out with the story you were trying to tell, or how did
I
that work?
was. Yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah, I was trying to foreshadow, I was trying to lead it a certain direction, and I realized that that was going to just create a lot of plot holes that I can't necessarily fill.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Plot holes. Those are problems.
Yeah. And I probably still have some that I missed, and I
Mhm.
think, yeah, I don't know of them off the top of my head, but I'm sure that there may be a plot hole or 2 that people look at and go, "Oh, I wonder where that's going."
Yeah. Makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah. Um, so what's your, you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but what's your writing process like from kind of from start to finish?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I always start with brainstorming, and, even before I settle on a particular book, I use Google Keep for my notes, and I have endless notes about a lot of different stories that I've got ideas for. Some of them may never come to fruition, and others I'm actively working on. So it all starts in that kernel of an idea stage.
Hmm.
And then when I finally settle on the story I want to write, that's where I do all the major brainstorming and character brainstorming specifically, kind of like I talked about. I'll sit down and interview the characters, so to speak, and
Right.
figure out all the all the intricacies that make that character who they are.
Hmm.
Because uh, I really love my characters.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I um, I have I have a really strong relationship with the Nomad, for instance,
Mhm.
even though he's completely different than I am.
Right.
But yeah, I like to develop a relationship, I guess, with my characters, and so that's definitely the beginning stages, and then I'll just kind of sit down and start writing and figure out, what my first sentence is going to be, and then my first paragraph, and
Mhm.
just let the story evolve from there.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah.
So what when you go back and do editing or I guess when do you apply the editing? Do you wait until after beta readers or what's that process look like?
Yeah, I edit as I go. Um, Sometimes I'll be working on a certain chapter, and then I remember something from 2 chapters ago, and I'll go back to that chapter and fix that part
Mhm.
of it.
Mhm.
Um, because I'm kind of afraid that if I don't fix it right away, I'll forget.
Right.
And I could make notes to myself, but I'm not good about following up on notes.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I kind of fix it right in the spur of the moment, and then I'll go back to the chapter and move on.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah.
and my initial, after I completed the first draft, I went through uh, several edits of that draft, so like sub drafts, before I
Mhm.
even decided, okay, I think it's ready to give it to some beta readers to look at.
Mhm.
And even before the beta readers, I had one or two alpha readers that I'm like, hey, can you look at this and tell me honestly what you think? Am I just being completely uh, chaotic here?
Mhm. Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, it goes through several personal edits before I even think about giving it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you had a couple alpha readers, you had beta readers. Do you what I guess what are you looking for when you ask for feedback on a draft like that? You mentioned with the alpha readers, is this chaotic? Um, but kind of what are you hoping to get from the readers?
Yeah, so a lot of it is, structural, grammatical errors,
Mhm.
just anything that I might have missed. Story
Gotcha.
inconsistencies, that's a big one that I ask for.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think those are the big ones for me. Does the magic make sense?
Yeah.
Uh, is it too detailed? Is it not detailed enough?
Mhm.
Are we getting enough? Are we getting enough background on the characters? Uh,
Yeah.
uh, or am I giving the reader enough background on the characters and the world
Mm.
and things like that? So that's a lot of what I ask for
Yeah.
the readers. Yeah,
Yeah. It's good. I
mhm.
know, I mean, if there's any other authors that are watching, I'm trying to help them as well. As much as interview you, I'm trying to help other authors who might be watching this just to give them
Absolutely.
some ideas of things to work with. And so that's why I'm digging a little bit into this.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So where do you end up getting inspiration? I know you mentioned dreams.
Mhm.
That's a very common one for me as well. But where else do you find inspiration?
Yeah. Media is a big one. I'm a huge movie and TV lover.
Mhm.
I get inspiration from other writers, other fantasy authors, science fiction authors, even.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I've been reading almost my whole life, and I've always been into movies and video games as well.
Mhm.
Although video games don't really inspire my books per se, other than maybe an idea here or there of
Right.
different types of characters to write and things like that. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I draw inspiration from a lot of different places. For instance, one, uh, well, and I'll back up because I want to say there's some things that maybe I didn't realize I was inspired by
Mhm.
that other people see in my books. For instance, one reader in particular uh, said the Nomad reminded her of the Mandalorian,
Uh-huh.
and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, and I can kind of see it, even though the Mandalorian wasn't even around when I started
Mhm.
writing the book, and
Right.
so I guess maybe those types of characters I'm inspired by, though,
Right. Yeah,
for
that makes
sure,
sense. I mean,
assassins and
it's
bounty hunters and such.
bounty
Yeah,
hunters, lone gunslingers to some degree, yeah. Makes
yeah,
sense. No, he's not a gunslinger, but
yeah. He's not. Although I have been asked by people in the past if I was inspired by the Dark Tower, and I'm like, that's a great question because I wasn't, but I can see why you would ask me that. Uh,
right. Or it might just I mean, for example, with me, if I were to write something, inevitably it would be inspired to some degree by Lord of the Rings. Not
right.
not intentionally, not specifically, but it's just so ingrained in my understanding, in my worldview to some degree that I can't
Yeah.
escape. And so I think probably with you, you've got authors that would do the same thing. I know Neil Gaiman's a one of your favorite authors and stuff like that. So I suspect various authors that you've read a lot of have that same do that same thing for you, where they would, even if you're not intentional about it, it would still just be inspiration to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree. It's when something is so ingrained in you, it's hard to escape that in your own storytelling. Yeah.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So I guess what are some of your favorite stories, whether books or movies or TV shows? What are some of the favorite stories that you have that you just maybe they inspired you, maybe they didn't? Just what do you really like?
Yeah. So definitely the Shannara series by Terry Brooks. Um, I started reading Terry Brooks back in junior high school, and just absolutely fell in love with his world. Lord of the Rings for sure.
Mhm.
I love the Lord of the Rings as well. I didn't I didn't come to that one until I was an adult though. I read
Yeah.
it for the first time when I was, I think, 28, some right around in there. Whenever the first movie came out, is I
Right.
saw the first movie and I'm like, "Oh, I better go read the book."
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I definitely love Lord of the Rings, Shannara. The Deathgate Cycle by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman is one of my favorite series as well. And um, yeah, but I was also I grew up reading other stuff like the Hardy Boys mysteries and um,
Mhm.
yeah, Dr. Seuss, of course. So just
Right.
yeah, lots of
Yeah.
stuff that still lives with me today. So
Mhm.
yeah, I've
Yeah.
I've got a lot of favorite series that probably inform my writing in one way or another that I'm not aware of.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
All right. Where's another question? So what made you want to be a writer? What made you decide that you wanted to just sit down and write a book one day?
yeah. I don't know exactly. I've been writing stories all my not good stories, mind you, but I've been
Mhm.
writing stories all my life.
Mm.
And one day I it really was when I started reading the Shannara series that
Okay.
that I started really thinking about, oh, I feel like this is something that I would really want to do.
Yeah.
And I'd watch interviews with Terry Brooks and stuff like that, and think to myself, I've got a lot of stories in my head. I've always had a crazy, wild imagination, and I think there's some stories I could tell, and so it was kind of getting into Terry Brooks though that really kind of gave me the impetus to start writing my own stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah. I don't know. I've got, how many do I have? 4. I think I have 4 up there on my shelf that I haven't read yet. So for Shannara, and I want to.
Yeah.
I will at some point. I just, again, I don't. I read too slow, and that's a problem. When especially when you're a booktuber and you're supposed to be talking about books consistently, it's a problem if you can't talk about books because you haven't read any.
Oh yeah. I totally get it. I'm a slower reader myself, and I'm nowhere near caught up in the Shannara world.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I've got
How
so many
many
to read.
how many books has he written?
I
Is
want to
it
say
up in the
30 in
40?
Shannara just by itself.
Okay. Yeah.
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 And then of course there's
It's a lot.
Landover and the Child of Light series, which I don't think it's called that, but I want to read that as well. And
Mm, yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. Too many books. It's
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
it's a good problem to have.
Hmm. Yes, it is.
Where did it go? Okay, so what's you've got the 2 books. You've got Talendor's Guest and Nomad's Crucible. So what's next? What are you working on? Are there any of the specific stories in Talendor's Guest that you really want to dig into more, or anything like that?
Yeah. So the last story in the book, or one of the last stories, Dragonfall,
Mm,
is 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 kind of the beginning of of the first book that I really started writing. Um, and it's tentatively titled Scourge. I don't have a solid title for it yet. That may still end up being the title, but I've got so much work to do on that one, and I don't know when I'm going to get back to that one. But the ones I'm actively working on now are a book featuring the Ink Master
mhm.
from Talendor's Guest. I've done a lot of head plotting and written some notes about what I want that world to look like as far as a novel goes.
Mhm.
And I pretty much only write standalones right now. I'm open to
Okay.
writing a series, but I only do standalones for now. So, um, but yeah, um, so that will be a standalone, at least as far as I know. And then I'm also working on a novella which chronicles the beginnings of my entire headcanon, my entire
Mm,
multiverse, if you will. I don't think it will be as intricate as the Cosmere because I don't want to
right.
do that to people.
Right.
But
Thank you.
yeah, it won't be nearly that immersive as far as crossovers and stuff like that. It's
Mhm.
not going to be that, but I
Yeah.
feel like I want to tell the beginnings of where my universe came from, and
Mhm.
that one is tentatively codenamed Dreamer, and that's
Okay.
uh, I know where I want it to go. I've written a couple of chapters, and um, I feel like I have a good direction for it.
Yeah.
But it's not it's still in the very beginning stages. But
Mhm.
I've probably done more work on Dreamer than I have on the one about the Ink Master. So
Okay.
when I sit down and determine which one of those is striking me more in terms of being my muse, then
Mhm.
we'll see what happens with that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's good. It's good. Um, so the so you are you kind of thinking that they're all going to generally be that size, or you
Yeah.
think sometime maybe they'll get gigantic like some other authors do?
Um, I definitely don't think I have gigantic in me. I could be
Okay.
wrong,
Yeah.
but I feel like if I've got a gigantic story to tell, at that point, I need to make it a trilogy or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, I don't mind reading chunky books, but
Right.
my preference is for reading wise is probably between 4 and 500 pages.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a good sweet spot for most readers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I feel like if a book gets too large, it tends to become intimidating. So I feel like uh, wh- uh, what I want from my readers is to give them maybe at most a 500-page book, probably less though. So
Mhm.
yeah, and Ari has decided to join us. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think anywhere between 350 and 500 pages is probably the maximum you will ever get from me. And if it goes beyond that, we need a second book or maybe even a third book. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
I just had another question and it's gone now. Um,
Yeah, it's all good. Take your time.
I don't know. I don't remember. I had something. Probably wasn't interesting. That's probably why I forgot it. Um, all right. What else have I got here? Um, it almost came back. Oh well. If it comes back to me. Oh, that's what it was. I
Okay.
remember. Um, so are you or would you ever kind of think outside the realm of fantasy? Would you ever write a different genre or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely I would. I would love to dabble in some kind of what's the maybe a noir setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know if I'd be good at writing mysteries though. I'm kind of on the fence about that. So, but I would be interested in trying my hand at that,
Hmm.
and definitely more. I feel like I could do science fiction. In fact,
Yeah.
the Nomad has a little bit of that,
Right. Yeah.
and I feel like the way I've thought up my universe, there could be futuristic worlds that incorporate some of that.
Hmm.
Um, but I think primarily I'm a fantasy writer,
Yeah.
but I'm open to exploring mysteries and uh, mystery thriller, science fiction as
Hmm.
well. So.
Yeah. Are there any specific ideas that you're just dying to play with, or concepts or character types or anything like that?
Mm. Huh, that's a great question. I would definitely um I would definitely like to play with some type of Colossus type character,
Mm,
like
yeah.
like a Titan or something like that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that would be kind of cool to
Yeah.
play with.
I'd love to see that. I'd love to see more fantasy with giants or with
Yeah.
big monsters that are not monsters in that way, but that they're monsters because that's what we consider them, but they're a different species, a different race of creatures, and just yeah, I'd love to see that. That'd be cool.
One game I played way back in the day, I think it was one of the first games I played on the PlayStation 3 maybe, and that was Shadow of the
Mhm.
Colossus.
Okay.
Uh, and uh, and it was really cool because you're just this little guy, and
Mhm.
you're trying to climb up these ginormous colossi and try and find their weak points and things like
Right.
that. It was a very
Yeah.
unique type of video game, but I would love to play with something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you do, I'll be very excited. I'm gonna
Yeah.
say when, not if. When you do, I'll be very excited.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. It's
yeah.
definitely a win for sure.
Mhm. All right. Um, I asked where I had one other one specifically that I wanted to ask. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Um, so for someone who has no idea who you are, has never heard of your books, or has so many other books on their TBRs or whatever, why should they read your books?
Yeah. I feel like my books offer something completely unexpected in some
Mm,
ways, and if you're looking for something that's somewhat familiar but also plays with unique ideas, and you like to read short books
mhm.
and and also books that don't have a lot of the standard tropes, then I specifically I think the Nomad's Crucible would be good for that person.
Yeah.
Uh, there are there are stories like that in Talendo's Guest, but Talendo's Guest is also a little bit tropey because I was playing
Mhm.
around with stuff.
Right.
So you've got your dragons and you've got your wizard types and
Mhm.
things of that nature. But uh, I feel like I feel like there's a lot of more unique stuff in the
Yeah.
Nomad Crucible. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I'm not afraid to think outside the box with my stories, and I think that would appeal to certain readers as well.
Yeah.
Um, you can tell I'm not good at promoting my books.
That's all right. I'm not either, so I'm trying to make you do it because you're better at it than I am.
Yeah.
Have you worked on anything else? Do you have short stories and anything else?
I don't. Yeah, the only things I've done any work on outside of this is um, just oh, the Dreamer
Mhm.
and the book that I'm hoping to write that includes the Ink Master. I did write a book called Thinkable Thinks That I Have Thought, and it's just more my musings on
Mhm.
life and certain issues that come up in life and things like that. And it is available on ebook on Amazon,
Okay.
but it's ebook only. And it started out as a series of blog posts when I was going through my philosophical phase,
Mhm.
and then I took the blog down, but I saved the blog entries and I tweaked them and kind of expanded a little bit on them,
Right.
and that's what became that book. So it's kind of a
Okay.
nonfiction book. So
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and it's on Amazon. I think it's like 99 cents or whatever. It's just
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
but
Would you ever be interested in it? Like, I know there's been several booktube anthologies going around. There's been Half Human Heroes. There was Advent of Winter. Anything like that? Would you ever be interested in doing something like that if somebody were to invite you?
oh, I totally would. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would definitely say yes to something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I love the guys that have done stuff like that. I know Jeremy Fee did one.
Right.
And he was kind of the editor on one of them, and
Yeah.
um, someone else I can't remember right off the top of my head, but I know there's another booktuber that oh, maybe it was Criminale. Criminale did
Okay. Yeah, I
like
think so. Yeah.
yeah, he did like a I think his was more focused on like mystery and stuff like that,
Mhm.
but or
Yeah.
maybe it was
The genres.
yeah, maybe it was a Garbagast anthology. I can't remember,
Mhm.
but
Something. Yeah.
yeah, just
Yeah.
like Pulp Fiction. But
Right.
yeah, I'd love doing something like that.
Yeah. All right. So if anybody watches this, now you know who to go to. Yeah. That'd
Thank
be
you.
cool. Um, so are you reading anything right now? What are you reading? What's on coming up next or whatever?
Yeah, I am. I'm currently reading God Emperor of Dune by Frank
Okay.
Herbert, and I really struggled with uh, these last two books in the Dune saga because I really loved Dune and Dune Messiah. Children of Dune was a real struggle for me. It was much too
Mhm.
long and not very coherent, I didn't think. God Emperor of Dune is better, but it's still a
Okay.
little bit of a struggle for me.
Yeah.
So my goal is to read the entire 6 books that Frank Herbert wrote and see
Mhm.
where I go from there. But I don't know if I would reread them. Dune is definitely a reread, and
Right.
probably Dune Messiah. But I don't know if I would ever reread Children of Dune and God Emperor
Mhm.
or the other books. But we'll see. I haven't finished the series yet.
That's I've read Dune and I want to continue. But everybody says, but they're not that great afterwards. And so like I want to just to see if my opinion would be the same. But yeah, Dune is
Yeah,
great. I've really enjoyed the 2 times that I've listened to Dune. I haven't read it physically yet.
yeah, it is really good, and I personally think Dune Messiah is really good too, and it gives a satisfying conclusion to Paul's
Mm,
character arc.
right.
So I feel like that's definitely a must read. But if you don't like it, that's cool too.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I definitely recommend at least Dune Messiah, and then I would say maybe you don't have to read beyond that. But
I
yeah,
well we'll see. We'll see what happens. I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Um,
what's your preferred medium for reading?
Definitely ebook.
Okay.
I also like physical reading, but I gravitate toward ebooks because of my eyesight. I mean, even though I
Mm,
wear glasses,
right.
it's just a lot easier on the eyes to read an ebook. And also too, I tend toward minimalism. And
Mhm.
so, I don't want to own so many physical books that I have to buy numerous bookshelves and buy
Right.
bigger houses and find a place to store it. I just
Yeah.
I save that for the books that are really important to me, and then everything else is on my ebook readers. So
Interesting.
I do audiobooks as well, although not as much.
Okay.
Um, Certain series lend really well to audiobooks, like the Dresden
Right.
Files.
Yeah.
Um, The Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell is another one that
Mhm.
lends really well to audio,
Yeah.
but mostly my audiobooks are nonfiction.
Okay.
If I do nonfiction, it's usually by audiobook. So,
Yeah.
but
And yeah.
I am doing a reread next year though for Lord of the Rings. I'm going to do the
Okay.
audiobook. I'm
Yeah.
excited about that.
The circus narration
The
ones.
circus
Andy
narration.
Circus. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Those
very
are good.
excited about that.
He does a
So,
great job. I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do my annual reread of them. I think I'm going to try. I think I'm going to shoot for physical for The Hobbit, and then for Lord of the
yeah,
Rings, we had at one point, my family had an audiobook of them, and I listened to it at one of my early rereads of it. I listened to the audiobook, and I had that was, I don't know, close to 10 years ago or so.
hmm,
And so I don't remember. I don't know if we still have it anywhere and anything like that. But I'm gonna look for it and see, because if we do, then I want to re-listen to that audiobook, because it had um like it had a musical theme that would play at the end of each chapter or beginning of each
nice.
chapter, something like that. And it randomly comes back to my head, and I start humming it and stuff like that. So I want to see if I can find that one for my Lord of the Rings reread this year or this coming year. So, but we'll
That's
see. I
cool.
don't know.
I've heard that Andy Serkis does a lot of singing when it comes to the
Mhm.
actual songs in the book, and I'm
Yes.
I'm looking forward to that because I had I had my own head canon of what the songs sounded like,
Right.
and then I watched and then when I saw season 2 of Rings of Power, I'm like, that's not necessarily how I pictured Tom Bombadil singing his songs.
Right. Yeah.
But okay, I guess.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation, right?
It really is. I would like to have that conversation
Yeah,
someday,
that
but
would be
I
cool.
got to get that planned. Where did that go? So, um, the last thing that I kind of have planned for these interviews is for you to recommend me a book, or recommend a book, not necessarily to me, but if you want to tailor it specifically to me, go for it. So, do you have
Okay.
a book that you would like me to read?
Yeah, definitely. Let me see. Uh, I know it's on my physical shelf. I want to grab it here. Um, oh, it is a really tough decision, but I think, and it's actually a duology, so I'm going to recommend you a duology if you haven't
Okay.
already read it, and that would be Strange the Dreamer
Okay.
and Muse of Nightmares. Uh, this is
Perfect.
just a really, really fun series. And it's complete in 2 books. It's it's not necessarily YA, but young adults could definitely read it.
Mhm.
But it's kind of also on that border of like new adults. So like right in that age range of older young adults and newer adults, I guess I'll say.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's a really fun story. It's really unique, very whimsical as well. So if you like whimsical stories,
Mhm.
I think you'll really like these.
Perfect. Yeah.
So anybody watching, including yourself,
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
this is a great series to read. So
Yeah, I know they've been on my just the notes app list that I have of books that I'd maybe like to read at some point. So I'll move them forward. I
cool.
remember I basically since I started watching BookTube, and I don't remember how long ago that was, probably close to 5 or 6 years ago now. Um, Elliot Brooks was talking about him. I've seen you talk about him several times. So they're there. They're in my mind, and someday I'll get to them. I'll try and move them forward though, for sure.
Yeah, they first hit my radar because of Elliot Brooks. Yeah, she
Yeah.
was the first one that put it on my radar too. So,
Okay. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah. Um, I don't know if anybody watching has any questions or comments for Charles here before we get going. But is there anything else that you'd like to say?
No, I think I'm good. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about my book. And yeah, this has just been really fun. I think you did a great job interviewing, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So, and I would be truly honored with anyone out there that decides to read my books, and and if you do reviews, that's awesome. That helps out a lot as well to do reviews of the books, and and always do an honest review. I want to grow and improve my craft, and so
Mm.
any kind of reviews will do, whether negative, positive, in between. I'm open to any and all feedback. So yeah, yeah.
And I will make sure, I think I already do, but I will make sure that I have links to where you can buy them. Is there any specific place that's best to buy them from? Gives you the most money or anything like that?
Right now, it's only on Amazon.
All right.
So I am in the Kindle Select program, which gives me the most royalties. To
Okay.
I have to keep it exclusive to Amazon for the
Mhm.
first 90 days on that one, and so yeah, Amazon is the only place I'm currently selling it. I may
All right.
branch out and sell it on my own website at some point, but I have to get the
Yeah.
website put up first.
Right. Yeah. Um, so how long has Crucible been out now?
It came out October 15th, so it's
Okay,
been
so
out a month.
a
Yeah,
month. Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
That's cool. It's good. Has it had a good response? Have you seen a good response from it?
It has had. Yeah,
That's
I've
good.
seen a
That's
good
good.
response for the most part. Not a ton of sales, but
Mhm.
uh, just like I'm not good at promoting myself, I'm not good at marketing either. So
Right.
I'm
I
relying a lot
understand. I
on
get
word
it.
of mouth. But
Right.
I do make posts about my book on certain outlets, and
Okay.
I considered running an Amazon ad. I've heard those can be successful, but I have not
Yeah.
looked into that yet. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm I would like to do a review of it, but I would like to reread it so that I actually have the thoughts fresh in my mind, as well
Sure.
as see. I want to see what you've changed, what things are tweaked or removed or added or whatever, since things that I don't remember um, from when I beta read it for you. So I want to see, but I do want to review it, and I do plan to. I just gotta reread it first. So
Okay.
oh,
Cool.
audiobooks. Anything
Yeah.
with audiobooks that you want to do for these?
Yeah, so I am planning to work on uh doing a recording of Talendor's Guest next year.
Okay.
And I'm planning to do that myself. And my goal is to probably sell it exclusively on my website,
Okay.
so that that's one thing that I don't have to hand over to the gods at Amazon.
Mhm. Right.
But we'll see how that works out. But yeah,
Mhm.
I'm planning to do Talendor's Guest next year for audio, and then at some point I'll eventually record the audiobook for the Nomad as well. But
Fantastic.
Talendor's Guest is my priority because I've had a lot of people asking for it,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I need to keep my promises. So,
Right.
yeah, Talendor is the priority first, but I will eventually have an audiobook for both of them because I know that's a big market that I'm missing out on.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Perfect.
it's
Well,
become
that's
really
cool.
huge. So,
Yeah, hope that goes well for you.
thank
Yeah,
you.
I know for myself, I sit at a desk job 8 hours a day, so I get more audiobook reading in than I reading. So
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
I would love to have audiobooks for all the books. So
Awesome. Yeah.
but
Well, I'll let you know when they're ready, and yeah, I've got to figure out all the logistics around doing it and
mhm,
making sure I've got good sound quality and noise
right.
cancellation and all that good stuff. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
not easy, but no, makes
yeah,
sense. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Hopefully people will see this. Hopefully, if anybody's watching, I hope that they go check out your channel, because Bookish Chaz is your channel name. I'll have
mhm,
that link for sure as well. Go check out his books. I'll leave links to them to Amazon so that you can go buy them. All that stuff. But yeah, check out his books and see what he's got to say on his YouTube channel. So thank you again for joining me for this.
yeah.
We will see you guys again soon. Stay warm.